The plane was silent as Karen stormed down the aisle, her face flushed with rage. "This is unacceptable," she screeched, her designer bag swinging wildly. Little did she know, karma was about to deliver a brutal comeuppance, one that would leave her reeling at 30,000 feet. Karen had always considered herself better than everyone else. From the moment she stepped onto the crowded flight, her beady eyes scanned the cabin, searching for any sign of inferiority. When she reached her assigned seat, her expression soured. "This is completely unacceptable," she huffed, glaring at the unsuspecting passenger occupying the adjacent window seat. "You're in my seat. Move. Now." The young woman looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, but this is my seat. I have the boarding pass to prove it." Karen's nostrils flared. "Do you have any idea who I am? I demand you get up this instant." "Ma'am, I'm not going to move. If there's a problem, you'll need to speak to the flight attendant." "A problem? The problem is you're sitting in my seat. You pathetic little—" "Excuse me, is there an issue here?" A stern-faced flight attendant approached, cutting off Karen's tirade. "Yes, there is an issue," Karen spewed. "This girl is in my seat and refuses to move. I demand you fix this immediately." The flight attendant glanced at the boarding passes. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this seat is assigned to the passenger here. There's no mistake." Karen's face twisted in fury. "No mistake. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm a platinum member of this airline. I deserve better than this." "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but your status doesn't entitle you to take someone else's seat. If you'd like, I can try to find you an alternative, but I cannot force this passenger to move." Karen's eyes bulged. "This is an outrage. I'm not going to stand for this." Throwing her designer bag onto the floor, she stormed down the aisle, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. The young woman watched, her heart pounding. She had a feeling Karen's meltdown was far from over. Karen stormed towards the front of the plane, her designer heels clicking against the worn cabin floor. Passengers shrank back in their seats, eyes averted, as she made her way to the cockpit. "I demand to speak to the captain this instant," she screeched, slamming her fist against the locked door. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ma'am, what seems to be the problem?" "The problem is that your incompetent staff have given my seat to some nobody, and I won't stand for it," Karen bellowed. "I'm a platinum member of this airline, and I deserve better treatment." "I understand you're upset, ma'am, but I'm afraid I can't intervene in this matter. The flight attendants are trained to handle seat disputes. If you have an issue, I suggest you speak with them." Karen let out an exasperated groan. "This is unbelievable. Do you have any idea who I am? I'll have your job for this." The pilot sighed. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to return to your seat. If you continue to create a disturbance, I'll have no choice but to notify the authorities." Karen's face turned beet red. "Don't you dare threaten me. I'm not going anywhere until this is resolved." She turned on her heel and stormed back down the aisle, her heels clicking in a furious rhythm. The other passengers shrank back, avoiding eye contact as she approached her seat. The young woman braced herself, her heart racing. "Ma'am, please, let's just—" "Shut up," Karen spat. "This is all your fault, you pathetic little nobody. I'm going to make sure you never fly with this airline again." The woman's eyes widened in fear as Karen reached into her bag, pulling out her phone. She began furiously tapping, muttering under her breath. Suddenly, a chime rang out, and Karen's expression morphed into a menacing grin. "There," she hissed. "Now let's see how long it takes for your precious seat to be taken away." The woman swallowed hard, wondering just what kind of trouble she had found herself in. Tension hung thick in the air as Karen smugly pocketed her phone, her gaze fixed on the young woman. The woman's heart pounded, her mind racing with worry. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen's lips curled into a malicious smile. Oh, you'll see soon enough. But let me make one thing clear. Nobody gets away with defying me. The woman swallowed hard, her palms growing clammy. She glanced around the cabin, hoping to catch the eye of a flight attendant, but they were nowhere to be seen. Just then, a commotion erupted near the front of the plane. A group of uniformed officers were making their way down the aisle, their expressions stern. "What's going on?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. Karen simply smiled, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Justice is about to be served." The officers approached the woman's row, their gazes fixed on her. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us," one of them said. The woman's heart sank. "But I haven't done anything wrong," she protested. "I'm afraid we have no choice. You're being removed from this flight." The woman's eyes darted to Karen, who was watching the scene unfold with undisguised glee. "This is insane. You can't do this." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the decision has been made. Please gather your belongings and come with us." Panic gripped the woman as she frantically shoved her belongings into her bag. As she was being escorted down the aisle, she caught a glimpse of Karen, who was smirking triumphantly. "You won't get away with this," the woman cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "I'll report you." Karen simply shrugged, her expression dismissive. "Good luck with that," she sneered. The woman's heart sank as she was led off the plane, her mind reeling with the realization that she had become the victim of a ruthless and calculated act of revenge. As the stunned passengers watched the young woman being escorted off the plane, a hush fell over the cabin. Karen sat back in her seat, a smug expression on her face, relishing her perceived victory. But her triumph was short-lived. Moments later, the flight attendant reappeared, her brow furrowed with concern. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, addressing Karen. "I need you to come with me, please." Karen's eyes widened in surprise. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. "I thought you had taken care of that situation." The flight attendant's expression remained serious. "We have some new information, and the captain would like to speak with you immediately." Karen hesitated, her mind racing with possibilities. Had her plan somehow backfired? Reluctantly, she rose from her seat and followed the flight attendant to the front of the plane. The captain greeted her with a stern look. "Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The woman you had removed from the flight was actually a member of our air crew, traveling on a non-revenue ticket." Karen's face paled. "What? That can't be right. I had her arrested for refusing to give up my seat." The captain shook his head. "That was a mistake on our part. We should have verified her identity before taking action. I'm afraid you've caused a significant disruption to our operations, and we take that very seriously." Karen's mind raced as she grasped the gravity of the situation. But I'm a platinum member. I demand to speak to your supervisor immediately." The captain's expression hardened. "I am the supervisor, ma'am, and I'm telling you that your actions have consequences. You're being detained, and we'll be handing you over to the authorities once we land." Karen's mouth fell open in shock. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The captain's voice was unwavering. "I don't care who you are. You've broken the law, and you'll be held accountable. Now, please come with me." As Karen was led away, her designer bag swinging in her trembling hands, the other passengers watched in stunned silence. The young woman, now revealed to be a member of the flight crew, shook her head in disbelief. "Karma's a bitch," she murmured, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Karen's world had crumbled around her in a matter of minutes. As she was escorted off the plane, her mind raced with a mixture of disbelief, humiliation, and sheer panic. The handcuffs chafed against her wrists, a harsh reminder of the severity of her predicament. She had never imagined that her petty act of revenge would backfire so spectacularly. When the plane landed, she was immediately ushered into a waiting police car, the glares of the other passengers burning into her back. She had been reduced from a self-proclaimed VIP to a common criminal, and the realization was like a punch to the gut. As the car pulled away from the airport, Karen's defiant facade began to crumble. Her manicured nails dug into the palms of her hands, and her throat tightened with the onset of tears. "This can't be happening," she muttered, her voice trembling. "I'm Karen Walters, for God's sake. I don't belong in the back of a police car." The officer behind the wheel spared her a glance in the rearview mirror, his expression unsympathetic. "Well, Ms. Walters, your behavior on that flight was completely unacceptable. You're facing some serious charges, and I can assure you that your status or wealth won't save you this time." Karen's eyes widened in panic. "Charges? What charges? I demand to know what's going on." The officer sighed. "You're being charged with disorderly conduct, interference with flight crew, and making false accusations to law enforcement. Those are all federal offenses, and you could be looking at fines and even jail time." Karen's heart sank. "Jail time," she squeaked, the color draining from her face. "But I've never been in trouble with the law before." "That may be true, but your actions today were incredibly reckless and put the safety of the entire flight at risk. The judge is going to take that very seriously." Karen's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out of this nightmare. She had always been able to manipulate her way out of trouble, but this time it seemed that her entitled behavior had finally caught up with her. As the police car pulled up to the station, Karen felt a crushing sense of dread. The reality of her situation was sinking in, and she couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment that her privileged world would come crashing down. As Karen was led into the police station, the gravity of her situation truly began to sink in. Her designer shoes clicked against the linoleum floor, the sound echoing through the stark, sterile environment. She was ushered into a small, windowless room where a stern-faced officer instructed her to take a seat. Karen perched on the edge of the metal chair, her back rigid, her hands trembling in her lap. "All right, Ms. Walters," the officer began, his voice calm but firm. "I'm going to need you to answer a few questions about the incident on the flight." Karen swallowed hard, her mind racing to come up with a plausible defense. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding," she insisted, her tone laced with desperation. "I'm a platinum member of that airline, and I was simply asserting my rightful place on that flight." The officer regarded her with a dispassionate stare. "That may be how you see it, but the facts tell a different story. You caused a major disturbance, interfered with the flight crew, and made false accusations that resulted in the wrongful removal of another passenger." Karen's eyes widened. "But she was in my seat. I had every right to demand that she move." "That may be true, but you escalated the situation in an unacceptable way. Threatening the flight crew, attempting to have the passenger arrested. That's not how a reasonable person would handle a seating dispute." Karen's face flushed with indignation. "Reasonable? Do you have any idea who I am? I'm Karen Walters, a respected businesswoman and philanthropist. I don't deserve to be treated like a common criminal." The officer's expression remained impassive. "I'm afraid your status doesn't exempt you from the law, Ms. Walters. Your actions had real consequences, and you'll be held accountable." Karen's heart sank as the realization dawned on her. No amount of money or influence could save her this time. She had pushed her privilege too far, and now she was facing the very real possibility of severe legal repercussions. As the officer continued to grill her with questions, Karen's once unwavering confidence began to crumble. The weight of her actions bore down on her, and she couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment her carefully constructed world would come crashing down around her. The hours seemed to drag on as Karen sat in the small, sterile interrogation room, her mind racing with a desperate attempt to salvage her situation. She had never faced consequences quite like this before, and the unfamiliar feeling of vulnerability was both terrifying and infuriating. As the officer continued to grill her, Karen's defiant facade began to crack. She found herself stumbling over her words, struggling to maintain the air of entitlement that had once come so naturally to her. I'm telling you, this is all a misunderstanding," she insisted, her voice tinged with a hint of desperation. "If you just call my lawyer, he can straighten this out in no time." The officer shook his head, his expression unwavering. "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Ms. Walters. Your behavior on that flight was not only disruptive, but it also put the safety of the passengers and crew at risk. That's a very serious offense." Karen's heart sank as the gravity of the situation truly sank in. "But I've never been in trouble with the law before," she protested, her voice quivering. "Surely there must be some way to make this go away." The officer fixed her with a stern gaze. "I'm sorry, but that's not how the justice system works. You're facing some very real charges, and the consequences could be severe. The best thing you can do now is cooperate fully and hope for leniency from the judge." Karen felt her composure slipping, the veneer of control she had so carefully cultivated crumbling before her very eyes. "Leniency?" she scoffed, her desperation morphing into defiance. "I don't need leniency. I'm Karen Walters, for God's sake. This is an outrage, and I won't stand for it." The officer simply shook his head, unfazed by her outburst. "I'm afraid that's not going to work here, Ms. Walters. Your status and wealth don't give you a free pass to break the law. You'll be treated the same as any other offender." Karen felt the weight of the officer's words like a physical blow, the realization dawning on her that she was no longer in control. For the first time in her life, she was facing the consequences of her actions, and the prospect of losing her freedom was a terrifying one. As she was led away to be booked and processed, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and uncertainty about what the future held. The once unassailable fortress of her privilege had been breached, and she found herself staring into the unknown, uncertain of where the road ahead would lead. As the days passed, Karen found herself navigating the unfamiliar waters of the legal system, a world far removed from the comfortable confines of her privileged existence. The charges against her were serious, and the prospect of facing jail time weighed heavily on her mind. In the end, the judge took a stern stance, unwilling to grant leniency despite Karen's pleas and her lawyer's frantic attempts to downplay the severity of her actions. The message was clear: her status and wealth did not entitle her to special treatment, and she would be held accountable for her reckless behavior. The sentencing was a bitter pill for Karen to swallow. She was ordered to pay a hefty fine, complete community service, and serve a brief stint in a county jail. The humiliation of being treated like a common criminal was a blow to her carefully cultivated sense of superiority, and she found herself grappling with a newfound sense of vulnerability and shame. As she sat behind bars, surrounded by the unfamiliar faces of her fellow inmates, Karen was forced to confront the reality of her actions. The carefully constructed facade of her entitled existence had crumbled, and she found herself staring into the abyss of a future that no longer promised the unquestioned deference she had once taken for granted. In the end, the irony of the situation was not lost on Karen. Her desperate attempt to assert her privilege had backfired spectacularly, leading her down a path of consequences that she had never imagined. The reality that had hit her so hard at 30,000 feet was now a harsh and inescapable truth that she would have to face head-on. As she served out her sentence, Karen found herself forced to reevaluate her values and her sense of self. The privilege that had once been her greatest asset had become her greatest downfall, and she realized that true worth and respect could not be bought or demanded, but rather earned through humility, empathy, and a genuine understanding of the world beyond her own narrow perspective. In the end, the lesson Karen learned was a hard one, but it was also one that had the potential to reshape her life in ways she could scarcely have imagined. The entitled Karen, who had taken to the skies that fateful day, had been irrevocably changed, and the path ahead, though uncertain, held the promise of a newfound understanding and a chance at redemption.